It's been almost 2 decades since we started our journey to educate and help you take action so you may better manage your financial future. Our goal is to help you accomplish your life's purpose. This podcast reveals financial tips, strategies, and insights that will help you to set your financial goals and guide you along the way. This is Managing Your Financial Future, brought to you by the advisors at Lucia Capital Group. Yeah, let's manage your financial future. What do you say? We'll manage your financial future, your present. Can't do much about your past, but we're going to talk about a little bit about the past and the good old days. Johnny Dean here, podcast host, not an advisor, but here with the advisor, him own self, Professor Rick Plum. Welcome back, sir.
Well, thank you. Now, you talk about the past, and we actually do have to deal with the past because unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, your experiences of the past will affect your decision-making process for the present and the future.
They always do.
And so we have to come to terms or grips, or however you want to look at it, with what has happened in the past to make rational decisions going forward.
Oh, man. And that applies not just to the topic today, but all throughout finance. In fact, in other aspects of life, too. But we're going to stick with the topic at hand. Had an email, and I was supposed to print it out. I didn't, but it doesn't matter.
Save the trees.
It was very close to what I'll
paraphrase.
I'll paraphrase here, and it has to do with mortgages. First of all, have you seen mortgage rates?
I've peripherally seen them. Thankfully, I don't need one at the moment, because I've locked mine in pretty well, and so it doesn't affect me directly. But I obviously look at it peripherally and saw that they've gone up quite a bit since a year or two ago.
Yeah, for the week ending April 27th, which is a little while back, but that's the date I have. It averaged 6.43%, 6.43, which was up a bit from 6.39% the week before. A year ago, it was in the 5s still. It was higher.
Yeah, but 2 years ago, it was in the 3s.
I don't have that data here, but yeah, it was in the 3s. They started raising rates, about a year ago?
A little over a year ago.
In the middle of 2022. So what happens, of course, for people that don't know, is when they raise rates, a lot of these mortgage rates are tied to, let's call it the 10-year.
Right.
And
now, just because the Fed raised a rate doesn't mean mortgages will change, because the Fed doesn't control the 10-year rate. It doesn't
control the overnight.
They control the super short-term rates.
Yeah.
And then that may or may not have a trickle-down effect on the rest of rates.
It always does.
But it has an emotional effect on what we feel the economy is going to do, and that affects what the longer-term rates, the 10 and and longer, will do. And so the 10-year rate has actually come down in the last couple of weeks. So we'll see if mortgages trend down again. But they've been going up for the last year, 18 months.
Well, it's funny how much I'm not going to get into the Fed stuff too much, but how much the Fed, how much, I don't want to say power, but they do have some power, because raising rates causes the stock market to drop generally. And or at least when they say we're leaving it open to future increases,
if the market anticipates what they're going to do, and as long as they stay with the anticipated number,
they're okay.
The market's usually okay.
Yeah.
It's when they do something outside of anticipation that the market reacts negatively or positively.
Yeah, so they know they have to be careful of all this stuff, but boy, they just fired away last year, and the markets responded. And then when markets do this, people start to get panicky, and so forth and so on, and it has a snowballing ripple effect. But what we're going to talk about here today has to do with mortgage rates. And the bigger question being, what do I do with my mortgage? And this this has to do with the email that I got, which was from somebody who was, I didn't get it. It came into they're not emailing me directly, but it came in to our Ask the Brain Trust? What is it?
I don't know.
I don't remember now. Ask a question, get your answer, something like that. You do that at luciacap.com. But it had to do with, what do I do with this? This person who had been paying down this mortgage, which was somewhere, I think, in the low to mid 3s.
Are you talking about value or interest rate?
That's the interest rate,
okay.
Low to mid 3s. And they've been paying it down because they didn't want a mortgage, and they wanted to have this done by 15, 16, 18 years, whatever it was, but the rates were nice and low for 30 years, so they got a 30. But now the question was, well, gosh, golly, oh gee, what do I do with this now? Because they said, I see interest rates are up in the 6s now for mortgages. Is this a wise idea to be paying down a mortgage that's about half the rate. I mean, it would be nice to be debt-free.
The mortgage being half the rate of current mortgages isn't the issue.
No.
Because you're not getting a new mortgage. You're not looking to refinance. And if you were, you're not going to because you've got a 3 and the currents are 6. But the issue is, it's not that I'm looking at mortgages at 6%. I'm looking at bank accounts, online, high yield savings accounts, FDIC insured savings accounts, treasuries at 4+%. And so it's costing me 3-ish, but if I took that same money that I was paying down, I could earn 4-ish. That's an arbitrage in my favor for now.
Yeah.
For a long time, we didn't have that. Even when interest rates, we were refinancing at the 3% rate, bank accounts were at the 0.0 nothing rate. So from a guaranteed cost, guaranteed interest saving point, we were losing money in that exchange for short-term guaranteed money if you wanted to go on the guaranteed rate.
Yes, if you're paying down a 3.5% mortgage from over the last 4 or 5 years, whenever you got it, you're getting what is tantamount to a 3.5% rate of return
on the money you've invested
on your money. Yeah. I mean, let's leave off the deductibility of
Well, it's amazing a lot because of the SALT deduction for a lot of states. All the states, but you've got to have a lot of interest.
Yeah.
In addition to that for a married couple, in addition to that $10,000 of SALT to be able to deduct. So a lot of people aren't even deducting their. I'm getting to the point where I'm not deducting the interest on my mortgage, and it's like, this is weird.
I did this year. I had some donations and stuff.
Yeah, the donations are helping me.
So that brought me over. But nevertheless,
but if I'm not hugely charitably inclined, it's unlikely that you're even getting a deduction for that interest anymore.
That's very true. At least for the next year or two, whenever these things sunsets. End of 25.
Yeah, so 23, 24,
yeah,
25.
That's from that original
Tax Jobs Act.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, let's stick with the topic here, which is that if you're paying down on a 3.5% mortgage, you're getting, as I said, a rate of return about 3.5%. Now, as you said, when interest rates, guaranteed rates, were in the low zeros,
right? It was, it was gaining ground. So,
you couldn't find a guaranteed rate really,
and depending upon how long that payment period was.
Yeah.
Now, if I've got a brand new 30. And I'm putting an extra $100 a month in, and I'm going to change it from a 30-year to a 28.5-year mortgage, I'm not concerned about the guaranteed short-term bank account money. I'm more concerned with what could I have done with that $100 over the next 28.5 years.
Yeah.
And so that's my bogey of what can I earn in that.
But
if we're trying to pay it down in 3 or 4 or 5 years, 8 years, maybe even 8 years, then you're looking at, I don't necessarily want to trust the market over that. So what are my more, fixed options? And that's where you look at the treasuries and the bank accounts.
Yeah. Should I put this mortgage and pay it down, or do I put it in? And the reason this person was asking that question was for that very reason, Professor Plum, which was now it's like, well, why am I paying? I'm getting a 3.5% guaranteed rate on this by paying this mortgage down, but there are 4%, 4.5% options out there over the next how many years?
You could lock in over 4% on a if you're old enough for a guaranteed fixed annuity. You can get treasuries close to 4, laddering them out 1, 2. Once you get past 2, they start coming down a little bit.
All right, but even so, that you could do a little bit better with that.
Yeah, and
so the question, Professor Plum, is would you pay down if we were gonna directly answer this person's email? Would you pay down a 3.5% mortgage, continue to do so in today's higher interest rate environment?
Well, fortunately, when you talk about mortgage and paying it off early and doing all that, there's two sides to the equation. There is the purely financial side. What is it costing me? What can I earn? And how do I manipulate this based on pure numbers?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the emotional side. And the emotional side will override the financial side. Well, how do I feel about paying off this mortgage quicker? And even though I may be a little bit behind the game doing it this way, it just makes me feel a lot better to be paying this down quicker. And so we have to decide which way we're going to go, which side of the fence we're going to let rule the roost here, the emotional side or the purely financial side. Now, the reality is, if it's costing me 3.5% and I can earn 4, but that 4 is taxable, it's kind of a push. I'm probably still going to, continue to pay down Again, it depends on how soon. If it's going to be If I'm changing a 30-year mortgage into a 27-year mortgage, that isn't the issue. I'm talking about somebody who's within, making double or triple payments, and they're going to be paid off in 5, 6 years, 7 years,
10 years, whatever.
Maybe, the longer it is, the more likely, the less likely I am to pay extra against it. The shorter I can have it paid off, and I'll put myself out there. I'm in that boat. My mortgage, I did not want to retire with that payment. I had a 30-year that would have taken me a couple years several years into retirement with a fairly hefty payment. Now, it would have been paid off at like 75, 80, but the good years, the early years of my retirement would have had a fairly hefty payment. And so at the time, I was refinancing, trying to get, and I got a pretty good rate, but I wanted to have it paid off about the time I retired, or paid way down, so that when the payment wasn't where, a big number. I didn't want that big payment going into retirement.
Well, that's the emotional side of it taking over.
Well, it's also from my side.
Well, for your side, it's also
I was looking at it. Where's the income going to come from to make
Yeah.
that big payment?
No, that's true. There's a practical side of it
So,
too.
but at the time, again, even though I refinanced down to a sub 3% mortgage, I was still paying it off fairly aggressively. I mean, hitting it hard. But I'm down closer to 2%, and I can earn 4% now with treasuries and even online savings accounts. I have stopped paying significantly more. I round it up. I mean, I don't pay the exact minimum. I like round numbers, so I round it up.
But you're playing the arbitrage.
But I'm stockpiling money in savings and bank accounts and treasury accounts, figuring that if we go back to where the savings accounts go lower than my mortgage payment, I'll just take that and plop it onto the mortgage as a big lump sum, but I'll have more of it to pop down than I would have paid down otherwise.
Yeah, see, and there's the rational side of it taking over. We had this discussion just right before we went on the air here with the podcast, and I was talking we were having this discussion about mortgages, and I said, well, gosh, Rick, would you pay off this 3.5%? And one of the advisors came up and said, no.
Are you crazy?
He walks right up and says, no, I would not pay that off. And they gave an example of somebody who I think paid.
They had a fairly high mortgage.
Yeah, it was over $1 million.
Over $1 million.
Yeah,
and
they decided to either pay it off or pay cash or something.
Right. And the difference was, if you invested the cash instead of paying off the mortgage, they could have made an extra $20,000.
Yes,
with guarantees. I mean, a T-bill. We're talking T-bills, not something that has risk to it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if there was $20,000 on the table, would you take it? He's like, well, that's what's on the table, $20,000 for this is an extreme example of over $1 million mortgage.
Yes, but here it is. It's what is the price of my peace of mind worth? In this case, for this person, it was worth the $20,000. Now, at $1 million whatever mortgage, $20,000 isn't that big in the scheme of things.
But $20,000 is still $20,000.
Well, it is $20,000. But you know what? There are people who would say, and this person I think did say, it's not worth it. I would like to be mortgage free.
Right.
In the heck with the $20,000.
And this is where that emotional side and the financial side. We talked about this with Roth IRAs for years.
Yep.
Where
that's true.
Where you could do, should I do a 15-year mortgage or a 30-year mortgage? 15-year mortgages are usually less expensive by half a point or more, but the payment's obviously a lot higher because you're condensing the repayment schedule. The 30-year mortgage is a little bit higher in interest rate, but you've got a lot lower of a fixed expense going forward. And you can take that extra money that you would have been using on the 15-year, if you qualify, and put it into a Roth IRA.
Well, this is a good strategy. I was going to have you explain this. We're kind of knocking this off just as a sidelight.
Right. But it's all a matter, and I mentioned this earlier, it's about the time horizon for paying it off. I was talking about having a mortgage paid off in 5, 6, 7 years. The difference between a 15 and a 30-year mortgage is obviously 15 years, the short period, 30 being the longer period. But you have to pay a lot more for that 15-year mortgage. But what if I could take that extra money that I was paying to get that 15-year mortgage and put it into a side account, side investment, specifically in our example, a Roth IRA. And as long as I'm like 45 when I start this, you can be a little younger. In 15 years, I'm 60 years old. I can get to my Roth IRA. That's why I was saying that. Qualified tax-free distribution.
Yes.
But if I take that extra money, and I can earn a rate of return equal to or greater than the cost of my mortgage, even today, do I think I can earn better than a 6% rate of return over the next 15 years in a stock market investment, in a long-term investment? I'm thinking I probably could. Now it was a lot easier to do when the rates were 3%.
Trickier now.
It's harder to do now.
So what you're talking about is this, for people who may not follow this. You have a choice between a 30-year and a 15-year mortgage. Just I'm going to keep this very simple. And you look and you say, well, the payments for the 30-year mortgage are, I'll just say $2,000 a month. I don't know. But now the payments for the 15-year mortgage, because we're cramming,
maybe $3,800 a month.
Yeah, it may be twice as much. So you say, well, gosh, I'd have this paid off sooner, but it's going to cost me $1,800 a month more for the next 15 years. Your idea here would be to take the 30
mortgage,
year mortgage, and instead of paying that extra $1,800 to the bank as you would have with the 15, pay that $1,800 to yourself and stick it in a Roth IRA.
And then invest that Roth IRA for the 15-year time horizon.
Correct.
And then, at the end of the 15 years, with the 15-year mortgage, you know where you're going to be at 15 years. You're going to be mortgage free. If you have the 30-year mortgage, you're going to have a remaining mortgage because you've just been paying the basic minimum payment. So you've got quite a bit of that mortgage, probably 2/3 of that balance or more still to pay over the last 15 years. But you've got this Roth IRA that, assuming you could earn at least or a little bit more than what the cost of the interest was, your Roth IRA will be bigger than your remaining mortgage. So you could then at that point do one of two things. You could either take a lump sum out of the Roth IRA, pay off the mortgage, still be mortgage free, but have leftover money in the Roth, even though you were out of pocket the exact same thing. And we're not going to get into the fact that you could have kept an interest deduction longer this way than the other way. We'll leave that off. But or you could just turn the Roth IRA into an income-producing type portfolio
and use that to pay
use it to make the payment tax-free on your mortgage.
It's a great strategy that you never hear discussed, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because as you said, when interest rates were 3-4% on mortgages, you could generally,
it's a little bit easier
it was easier to earn over a 15-year period of time
to beat that rate of return.
Now that you're in the 6.5% mortgage arena, can you earn that 6.5% over 15 years? Maybe, but it's more of a gamble now.
A little bit more. Yeah, obviously your hurdle's higher.
Yeah,
it's a little bit harder to do. But I think that over the 15 years, a Roth IRA invested in a good growth investment should do 7 to 9%.
Not guaranteed.
No, definitely not guaranteed.
But it's
nothing
reasonable.
In life is guaranteed, except for death and taxes.
But it's reasonable. It's reasonable to expect that.
But you have to have that time horizon. If you're talking about 3 or 4 or 5 years, I am nowhere near confident enough to say that in there. With that time horizon, the longer the time horizon, the more likely you can do that type of an outperformance.
So for people who have had a mortgage and they've gotten so many refis done over the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and especially the ones that have been done within the last 3 years or so, where people they do have these 3%. I have a high 2. I have a 2.75, but anywhere between 2 points.
He bragged about that for a long time.
Well, not that long, because you got your lower one within less than a year after I got mine. But I had some bragging rights for a while.
I just remember you procrastinating. Yeah. The rates were going down. And you kept. It took you forever to do the paperwork. And you were rewarded with an even lower mortgage when you refinanced. It's like, that doesn't work.
That was in 2012. That was
a long
mortgage,
time ago.
But I purposely did this one. I said, I got to get this rate. This is
a couple years ago.
This is in 2020. But, okay, so for people who have those lower mortgages, your advice may be, everyone's situation is different. But
my advice also depends on the individual, because some people, if they don't pay it against the mortgage, they won't save it. They won't invest it, however you're going to look at it. And it's like found money. So some people have the discipline to make the mortgage payment. This goes back to the emotional side of things. But they don't have the discipline to make sure that difference between the minimum payment and what they're actually paying on it, if they didn't make that, it may not go into the investment. They just don't save it. This is the problem with those old-fashioned green loans, where they were variable, but you put your entire check into the mortgage.
Haven't heard about those in a long time.
Well, it's because they didn't work. Yeah. On paper, they worked great,
but not in
reality. Nobody did it right.
They
don't have the discipline, and they ended up owing too much.
So if you have
the discipline to pay it down, you have that arbitrage working in your favor, as long as you have that discipline. But some people, they really should pay more on their mortgage because they don't have the discipline to do the investing. They only have the discipline to make that payment, because in their mind, that is a a thing that has to happen.
I try to think to myself, okay, I know how much I have left on my mortgage, the balance. If that much money dropped into my lap somewhere, a rich uncle left it or something to me, would I use it to pay down the mortgage and
pay off?
I'm sorry, pay off. Yeah. No, I would say. I just think I can do better than 2.75.
Sub 3% that you've got.
And and
you can make the payment.
And I can make the payment.
That's another, as long as you can afford to make the payment. This is one of the things that we've talked about this in the past, the difference between a 15 and a 30-year mortgage. I always like the 30-year mortgage more than the 15-year mortgage, even though there was a difference in cost, because the 30-year mortgage had a much lower payment, obviously. But if you were worried about it, if you wanted to pay off, if you really wanted that 15-year, fine, get the 30-year mortgage and pay it like a 15.
Just pay extra
principal. But if you ever have a bad month, you get laid off, you have high medical bills, you have anything of life that happens to you, you can always revert to that lower fixed expense for a month or two with the 30-year. But if you have the 15-year, you can't do that. But this again assumes you have the discipline to go back to that payment schedule if that was your initial plan.
Does. And
discipline's a big issue with these mortgages and how you go about doing this.
And the differences in interest rates between 15 and 30 have for the last 20 plus years really not been great enough. There was a time when
especially when they were in the threes, they were like a quarter point difference.
Well, that's just it. But there was a time I remember in the late 90s when mortgages were, roughly the 8-9% for a 30-year, but you could get a 15-year. I'm just trying to remember something like 6.5.
So there was a fairly significant difference in the rate.
Yeah. So there was that. But again, all that aside, now if you had somebody dump money into your lap
today,
that would pay off.
You mean after they revived me from the heart attack that I had, that somebody actually left me money?
Yeah. You won a lottery, or you don't play the lottery, but you did something. Just you found a bag of money.
I went to Vegas and won a gambling tournament.
Whatever it was. Okay,
yeah, right.
But would you pay off that mortgage with that money?
No, I'd put a pool in, but that's just me.
So you wouldn't even invest it.
I would invest it in my lot because I want to.
Okay, well, that's another option you could do.
I mean, there's lots of things, but I'm a unique case in that. It depends. And also, I would be more inclined, if you had asked me this 10 years ago, no, I wouldn't have paid down the mortgage other than trying to get a better rate. But I would have invested it. The closer I get to my maybe retirement date, which may be in the next decade or two.
Not
closer,
2.
Yeah, 2. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The closer I get to that, the more like, whatever. I should be over 80.
You'll be over 80. All right, but you would not.
The closer I get to it, the more likely I would at least pay it down. Now, I've come to the idea, for a while I was on track to have it paid off within the next couple of years. But I was thinking as I got closer to paying it off, I might not pay it off. In fact, I may go back to another 30-year mortgage. Once I get it down to like $50,000, $75,000.
Wow,
Do a new 30-year,
nothing.
Yeah, so that the payment is almost nothing. But that way I can impound it, and so I don't have to worry about coming up with property taxes and insurance. It's all just a monthly bill to me, so it's easier to manage my financial life.
I think that's a question people might want to ask themselves as far as, do they pay the mortgage? Do they add extra money to it? What would they do if they had the money to pay it off? Would they pay it off or wouldn't they? And then it comes down to the rational versus the emotional, and there's either side is fine.
Well, and that question sometimes surprises me, the answer, because we'd use that question when we're trying to evaluate somebody's risk tolerance just in investing.
Mm-hmm.
You've got somebody who's investing a certain way, and you say, well, if all of a sudden you received $1 million, how would you invest that? I remember we were doing a seminar with a bunch of people, and a lady was allowing us to ask her questions and do things. Fairly conservative investor. We looked at her portfolio. She was allowing us to talk about her portfolio. She was fairly conservative, and she was in her 50s, and we said, okay, and overnight you win $300,000. Somebody leaves you 300, whatever, you were saying. Yeah. How would you invest that? She's like, I'm going to Vegas. And in her mind, that wasn't her money. That was found money. She was going to go gamble with it.
Okay. All right.
But with her money, there was no way she was going to gamble with it.
Wow.
So she had this emotional distrattachment from this found money. it was different than the money she had worked for and she had saved. And she was going, in her mind, she was going to invest it totally differently.
People who hear that think there's a group of people out there listening to you say that, and they would say that's nuts. That is crazy. But then there's another contingent of people who would exactly agree with what that woman was doing.
And a lot of people may say it's crazy until they inherit some money. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing what the beneficiaries of an inheritance, some people are very disciplined with the money. Some people, they spend it very quickly.
Well, and it's, again, that goes down to your current situation, your current circumstances, and your feelings in the past about, we talked about, what are your experiences in the past with money? I mean, has it been scarce your whole life?
Right. It's a different attitude.
And that's what happens. When money is scarce, the value of it is huge.
But also, I've seen people where the money's been very scarce and they inherit money, and it's like the understanding is different than like, well, A, this wasn't my money. B, I can do anything I want with it because it's found I'm going to blow it. And they're crazy with it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Other people have the discipline, like, oh my gosh, this is such a scarce commodity. I'm going to hoard it.
But people for whom money has been scarce their whole lives, who wind up with money, they feel, I think, in many cases, that because it's so valuable to them, they're not going to hold on to it. They're going to go nuts. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong or right with that. It's just this is how people are. This is the
emotional side, the behavioral side of finance is the most beneficial and also the most detrimental to the way you manage your money.
It really can be, but
more so than the market, more so than taxes.
But the emotional will always,
almost always override.
It would override the rational side of the brain. Because it's funny when we were talking upstairs about would you pay it down, and the one advisor came and says, "Oh, absolutely not! I think that's nuts. It would be just you're leaving money on the table, and why would you pay down a 3% when you can invest it at 4%, and which is exactly what we've been saying."
Well, and the same thing earlier in my life, if I had money in a savings account, I didn't like that so much because it wasn't working for me. It wasn't, it wasn't doing me anything. It didn't have the same value as me investing it in the Roth, into the IRA, into the investment accounts, and earnings, hopefully working for me. As I've grown older, thank you for mentioning all that, having money in the bank sure lets me sleep well at night. It's just, I have money in the bank account and it's like, I'm not going to spend it. I'm not going to invest it. I like it in the bank account because even though I'll never have an emergency that big, and I've had some big emergencies where I had to shell out some few dollars here and there, and I still have money in the bank because it made me feel good. I sleep well.
Unspent money is technically wealth. Any unspent money you have. What is your wealth?
But it's not working. Now it's working harder this year than it was 2 or 3 years ago, but it's still not maybe working as hard as it could have worked for me elsewhere. But there's value to it there for me because I sleep really well with it there.
Yeah.
So from an emotional standpoint, that money, even though I don't need to touch that money for I don't know how long, I'm leaving it in safer areas because it helps my psyche.
Well, and this goes back to why we do a bucket strategy here. For people who wondered why I haven't mentioned buckets, well, this is kind of what it leads to, because it's not out there to make you inordinately wealthy. It's not out there to try to hit the home run every single time, because you can't. You can't do it. What it does is provide you with, we hope, some, I can't say they don't let me say that, but whatever, I won't say it. But think of the word that you folks listening, what this would do. That's what it's supposed to give you, some measure of comfort, I guess. And when you don't have to, when you wake up in the morning and you feel like you're in control of your life,
or at least parts of it.
Well, but the more control over, if you get up, you say, you know what, all my bills are, taken care of.
I know I've got the bills covered.
I don't have to worry about that. That there is happiness in that.
And you turn on the news and you see that the market's down, X% in one day.
That's a shame. Oh, well.
Oh, that's interesting. We'll probably talk about that at the golf course today or wherever you're going for the day.
But it's like, so my the stuff the money I'm going to need 15 years from now is now worth 6, 7, 8% less than it was a year ago. Oh well, all right. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
And that's the whole idea. If you want to learn more about this stuff, I know we've been talking about mortgages here, and we don't generally talk about things like that. But
it's important. It's an important issue because it is an expense that you may or may not have to carry into retirement. So you have to either figure out, are you going to get rid of it by the time you retire, or are you going to carry it through retirement? If you're going to carry it through retirement, how are we going to build up the money to be able to make the payments? And it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other on some of these things. But it's also going back to creating the emotional, satisfaction for what you're doing. So you stay with the plan.
That's the period on the sentence right there. Stay with the plan. And that's what the folks at Lucia Capital Group can help you out with. 800-644-1150 if you want to talk to them. I mean, this is one of the topics that comes up sometimes, mortgages. You've got this the person upstairs that we were talking to, they had just gotten off the phone with somebody and discussed this very thing. Just by coincidence.
Oh, always. Yeah, we're always talking about this.
Yeah, so if you have questions about that, maybe you got a dilemma. Do I pay this off? I've been paying it off over the last few years. Is it a good idea to continue to do so? Talk to your financial advisor at Lucia Capital Group, and they can at least help you with some of the numbers. Go through the numbers, and then you make the decision. If it's the emotional side and you'd rather go that way, fine. If you want to do the rational side, that's perfectly fine too, but you are in control. 800-644-1150, the number at Lucia Capital Group. Also find us online, luciacap.com, LUCIACAP.com. We do have some stuff on mortgages there if you want to search. And by the way, you want to ask us a question, go to that little box, that little search box, and you can type it in, and you can ask us that question right there. And who knows, we may be able to answer it right here on the program. And don't forget, you can subscribe to this podcast, both iTunes and Spotify. We've got a lot of new listeners, and we would always love to hear from you folks who have been listening to us on iTunes. Subscribe, listen to this program as always, and get it downloaded right to your device right there. Professor Plum, thank you so much. We've got Jonathan Savona, I believe, scheduled for the next
week?
Yeah.
Cool.
If I can work it out, he wanted to talk about, and we're going to get into this. This is a good topic now that tax time is over, and we did a lot of tax stuff before. But some of the things that he's seen, the people he's met with, the things that they're thinking about as far as taxes.
Right, and also you have to be a little. We were talking about a different situation. Jonathan and I talk pretty much every day. A situation he's seen coming up with tax preparers. And
yes, it's exactly what he wants to get
without
into.
good communication. But if you don't know what communication to have, how do you have good? If you don't know what you're talking about, how do you have communication with somebody?
You can't.
And so, unfortunately, he had a couple of people come to him from outside this and say, "Is this right?" It was like, what is this tax preparer doing?
Well, exactly. But a tax preparer is only as good as the information you give them. And so we're going to get into that next time with Jonathan. And I also believe I secured Richard Cook, another advisor here at Lucia Capital Group. He's going to talk a little bit about the 4% rule. He really is enjoying that. So anyway, that stuff coming up here. Don't miss that this season on Managing Your Financial Future. My thanks to Professor Rick Plum, who I should have said is a CFP professional, certified financial planner professional.
Certifiable.
Yeah, that's right. And advisor for a long, long time here at Lucia Capital Group. So we'll have you back next week.
Thank you. I'll be back.
Thank you. For Professor Rick Plum, I'm Johnny Dean. We will talk to you again next week.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and/or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. Accordingly, no client or prospective client should assume that the information presented serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from Lucia Capital Group or from any other investment professional. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material is gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. This material should not be considered a solicitation of an offer to sell or buy any specific security or offering. Investors should consult a financial professional to determine whether risks associated with an investment in the shares are compatible with their investment objectives. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Treasury securities are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, but are subject to inflation risk. CDs are FDIC insured up to $250,000 per depositor per insured bank for each account ownership category. Annuities are long-term investment products designed for retirement purposes. Guarantees are based on the claims-paying ability of the issuer, subject to their terms and conditions. Early withdrawals may be subject to surrender penalties, and if taken prior to age 59.5, may be subject to an additional 10% federal tax. Annuities are not FDIC insured. Certain terms and conditions apply, so please read insurance company materials carefully. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. Roth IRA distributions of principal from a Roth IRA are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59.5 or within 5 years of the date the Roth IRA was established, whichever is longer. Rick Plum, Jonathan Savona, and Richard Cook are registered representatives with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.